Okay, so today I will be talking about avoiding common mistakes and managing stakeholders. Just to introduce myself, my name is Taylor Woody. I'm an account executive here at Simply Stakeholders. I cover the United States territory and some parts of Canada as well. I'm also the stakeholder relationship expert. Today's agenda, we'll be covering common stakeholder management mistakes and how to avoid them, also stakeholder management, how to get it right, and then lastly, top 7 trends for stakeholder management that we've been seeing in 2023. Okay, I'm going to turn off my camera right here so I can just focus on the presentation. Okay, so I conducted a LinkedIn poll to better understand what people thought about the biggest failure in relation to stakeholder data management. This was really insightful, and really there was no wrong answer. All of these variables can negatively affect stakeholder data management. Overall, the lack of quality systems is really just the tip of the iceberg, which is then accompanied by a lack of direction, unwillingness to share data, and employees entering in data incorrectly. Before we dive deep into common mistakes with stakeholder management, let's first discuss why it's important. A vital part of running a successful project is to develop and maintain good relationships with those communities who will be affected and other stakeholders. Investing time in identifying and prioritizing stakeholders and assessing their interests provides a strong basis from which you build your stakeholder engagement strategy on. An in-depth understanding of your stakeholders, supported by a sound engagement plan that is strategic, helps you develop and maintain relationships with those affected, mitigate risk and align business goals, and also eliminate delays. In these days of increasingly legislation around protection of privacy and the right to information, it is even more critical that an organization or project has a clearly defined stakeholder management plan and protocols in place. The risk of not taking a systematic, controlled approach to stakeholder management are high and increasing along with community expectations. Stakeholder engagement is a delicate process. There are many factors that contribute to the effectiveness of your management and outcome of your projects. We've identified the top 5 mistakes that people often make in their stakeholder management process and how best to avoid them or surpass them. The most critical part of stakeholder engagement is also the first step of management. Without accurately identifying who your stakeholders are, you won't be able to create or use strategies. So planning for communication or risk management is impossible without first knowing who you are targeting and who is affected by your decisions. It is imperative for managers to understand this importance of stakeholders and the role each stakeholder plays in your process. Okay, so number 1, not identifying stakeholders correctly. Stakeholders can be identified by creating lists, segmenting, and categorizing based on industry or groups. These can then be segmented even further if needed. Stakeholders should also be mapped according to their power of influence, interest, and impact. By creating lists and mapping them, managers can effectively create plans and strategies for engagement purposes. Number 2, not meeting the stakeholder needs and expectations. After the stakeholders have been identified, it's critical then to understand their needs and expectations. This requires good communication, transparency, and accountability. The purpose of the project and all related information needs to be communicated with the stakeholders. It's imperative that during this communication, there is emphasis and focus on the stakeholders' needs and expectations to ensure they don't feel ignored or silenced. Failure to manage stakeholder relationships as per their power of influence, interest, and impact, something that we see a lot. When stakeholders are mapped according to their level of power for their influence, interest, and impact in a project, it creates a need for prioritization and the type of engagement needed. Stakeholders should be managed as per their mapping. It's a risky mistake to engage and manage all the stakeholders in the same manner. For example, a stakeholder with high influence requires a different strategy for engagement than one with low influence. Inadequate management of risk and concerns. Even a small issue can turn into a huge risk if it's left unchecked. All emerging issues need to be monitored regularly, and after identifying them, the impact of the risk needs to be assessed. If the risk heavily affects stakeholders, then this needs to be communicated to the relevant parties as a priority. For the success of a project, it's important the risks are managed effectively and resolved before they can cause any damage. The effects of risk must always be minimized. Ineffective communication. Poor communication leads to misinformation and uncertainty. The intention and meaning can also be misconstrued, which can be damaging to relationships with stakeholders. The key to effective stakeholder communication starts with listening. After identifying stakeholders correctly, you will have already listened to them as you now understand their needs and requirements. Only after this can you understand and build strategies to engage with them in an effective manner. Throughout the project, by keeping up frequent communication with your stakeholders, you will always be on top of any changes and impacts that are happening. When managers fail to communicate with their stakeholders, they leave themselves in the relationship open to negative impact. Stakeholders may feel left out, neglected, and ignored without frequent communication. Okay, next section, stakeholder management and how to get it right. To avoid these common mistakes in managing stakeholders, start by identifying your stakeholders today. Aim to have a better understanding of them early on in your project. Identifying and find solutions to emerging problems and avoid conflicts and stakeholder risk. There are several benefits to practicing good stakeholder engagement, and can help you cut down on cost. Companies that have grasped the importance of actively developing and sustaining relationship with the affected communities and other stakeholders are reaping the benefits of improved risk management, increased stakeholder support, and better outcomes on the ground. Good stakeholder management also brings in business intelligence. Understanding stakeholder concerns and interests can lead to ideas for products or services that will address stakeholder needs and allow the company to reduce cost while also maximizing value. Okay, here's some top 7 trends for stakeholder management in 2023 that we've seen so far. One, stakeholder analysis. In 2022, we saw more organizations recognize the need for more systematic and formal approaches to stakeholder analysis, especially stakeholder mapping. Many started on their stakeholder analysis journey for the first time last year, and we expect that trend to continue to accelerate. We have a great guide actually on getting started with stakeholder analysis if you're just getting started on this journey, that's located on our content hub. Number 2, turning analysis into action. Having started on stakeholder analysis and evaluation of engagement programs, many organizations have now recognized that analysis without action doesn't have much impact or deliver outcomes. In 2023, we're seeing more of a shift toward a greater exploration of how stakeholder analysis can be used to inform strategy, process, and outcomes of stakeholder relationship engagement. Number 3, digital transformation continues. The pandemic forced many organizations into adopting new digital technologies as their teams scattered to work remotely, and traditional in-person engagement events were no longer possible. A Deloitte study found that 85% of CEOs prioritized digital transformation during the COVID-19 pandemic. The changing nature of work will continue to drive digital transformation and see more organizations treating this as a strategic opportunity. Number 4, talent shortages. The Great Resignation had its impact, and a lot of organizations are still operating with reduced headcounts. Slowing economic conditions have also seen reductions in team size with forced redundancies. This possesses considerably challenges for organizational productivity and strategic planning. And the risk of losing critical information about stakeholders is also significantly higher, especially for those organizations that do not have a centralized stakeholder relationship management system like Simply Stakeholders in place. 5, making space for mental health. The pandemic was hard, not just on communities that we seek to engage, but also on our internal teams. Coming out of the pandemic 2022, we were supposed to be back to normal, but surprisingly, mental health challenges increased. Many struggled to balance hybrid work, uncertainty around health and economic impacts, and the cumulative impact of the previous years took its toll. More organizations had to make space for mental health considerations for their team, as well as the approaches they took to stakeholder engagement. Plans and expectations had to be reviewed and revised in this context. We expect this to continue in 2023, and this continues to become a new normal in the approach to internal and external stakeholder engagement. Number 6, Number 6, trust takes on central role. Sorry, that was kind of a tongue twister, you guys. Trust takes on central role. With the ever-increasing proliferation of misinformation, a number of high-value and high-impact data breaches in 2022, building trust is seen as critical to strengthen stakeholder relationships. Trust drives performance internally with higher workforce engagement, productivity, and retention. Organizations that are trusted by stakeholders outperform those that aren't. A recent Deloitte analyst found examples of 3 global companies, each with a market cap of more than 10 billion, that lost 20 to 56% of their value when they lost their stakeholders' trust. This is increasing recognition that building trust is something that does not happen after a catastrophic failure and when the social license to operate is lost. It is key to getting alignment with stakeholders, building, maintaining a social license, and working collaboratively with stakeholders to achieve the organization's strategic goals. Increasingly, trust will be seen as a key factor in enterprise performance. Number 7, last one, focus on governance, process, and accountability. Another essential focus will be key processes for governance and accountability, which are linked to building trust. Organizations will be increasingly looked to improve the way they manage their stakeholder relationships by putting in place robust governance frameworks, clear processes, and effective systems for tracking and reporting on performance. This will enable organizations to demonstrate their commitment to responsible and ethical stakeholder engagement and to be held accountable for the outcomes of these relationships. Okay, guys, that is the end of my webinar today. I appreciate everyone joining so much. If you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. Again, thank you for participation. We really appreciate your time and attendance for this. Thank you.